Well, Wayne, I grew up in North Carolina. I was the son of sharecroppers. My parents were farmers, and basically we pretty much raised everything that we ate. My father raised pigs and chickens, and he didn't raise any cattle, but my uncle did, and so we pretty much, we lived off the farm. We ate vegetables that we grew for the most part during the season, and all of our meat primarily consisted of pork that we raised, chickens. And so basically I ate that kind of lifestyle until I left home at the age of 17. And even beyond, in fact, I ate plenty of pork because that's the way we grew up. And so after that, I guess when I reached the age of about 21, 22 years old, I had a doctor's appointment, and I can't even recall why I went to the doctor on that day. But when I got there and the doctor examined me, he discovered that I was suffering from high blood pressure. And of course, I've never really weighed more than 128, 130 pounds soaking wet. And the doctors were kind of amazed, really, that someone my age, so young and so small, could have hypertension as bad as it was. And so I remember him bringing in other doctors and folk looking at me and examining me, and he had this worried look on their face. And so I'm like, oh, I don't know what's going on with me, but something is kind of serious here. And so he began to tell me that, we're kind of concerned because you, a young man that you are, with practically no weight to lose, suffering from such a high, blood pressure level. And I can't even recall at that point, Wayne, what the blood pressure levels were. And the first response for them was to put me on medication. Well, they really didn't want to do that because he said to me that if you take medication, if you begin medication for high blood pressure, most people are on it for the rest of their lives. And so he recommended some lifestyle changes to me. And at that time, I was not a runner. I grew up as an asthmatic as well. My mother was an asthmatic. In fact, she died from an asthma attack. And so I guess I unfortunately inherited asthma. And so I could hardly walk fast without, getting an attack. And I remember, a lot that my mother, when she wasn't up with me, suffering, trying to help me, comfort me through my asthma, she was, dealing with her own asthma issues. And so, as I mentioned, she even passed away as a result of an asthma attack. And so, I didn't do any running or exercise. My diet, very little fruits and vegetables. I didn't eat a lot of that. I was a meat eater. And so the doctor recommended that, first of all, I, maybe start an exercise program. And he suggested that, I need to, cut back from a lot of the meat, particularly the pork that I was eating, because I was consuming quite a bit. And so he recommended that those are some of the lifestyle changes that I could incorporate that would help me. And then he also recommended that, if I wasn't exercising or doing some form of exercise, that perhaps that might be something that would help me to, bring my high blood pressure levels down to a more normal level. And so the first thing I did was I decided that I was going to try to run. Keep in mind, growing up as an asthmatic, it was difficult to run. But as I decided to give it a try, and I also decided that I was going to cut out pork out of my diet. Now, I didn't know how I was going to do that because I grew up that way. I was eating more pork than I did anything, but I decided my health was more important. And so I decided that I would go and, by the help of God, try to eliminate pork out of my diet. And by His grace, I did. Now, at that time in my life, I was not a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. But I decided that I was going to eliminate the pork. And I continued to eat beef and chicken and all the other things, including all the scavengers that we were managed not to eat, after I became a Seventh-day Adventist and learned about the health message. But I eliminated pork completely. And I started to try my hand at running. And lo and behold, God is so good, I did not get an asthma attack when I realized that I could run a little bit. And so I started out slow, walking a little bit, running a little bit, and then I began to gradually pick up the pace and began to, stretch out my distance and so forth. And as a result of that, I discovered that I could run quite a few miles without stopping. And, I started, entering some of these little races and runs that are around in the community. And I remember the first run that I ever did, it was the Petco that sponsored a run annually back in those days. And so I entered in that run. It was a 6K or 10K, I'm sorry, 6.5 or 6 point, whatever this 10K is. I entered in that race and I did pretty good. Of course, I never came in first or any of those things, but I was proud of my accomplishments and having completed that run. And then years later, I began to start running in the Army 10 miler. And since I worked for the Department of the Army, I began to do that on an annual basis. And I discovered that I could do that 10 miles in right at 1 hour. And my personal best was 58 minutes and 54 seconds. That was, back in my younger days, but I was really impressed with that. I was in my 40s when I did that. But anyway, so that's how I started this track about running. And then as I became, Seventh-day Adventist Christian, I began to, of course, eliminate all of the unclean foods that the Bible admonishes us not to deal with. And then as I began to grow, I was determined that I would be a vegetarian. And so I stopped eating flesh foods altogether. And so basically, that's pretty much my story. And now I'm still running. Not as much as I used to. Since that time of starting up until now, I've had about 3 or 4 surgeries. I had surgery to repair a hernia. I've had eye surgery, and I've even had a foot surgery just recently, as it's under 2 years ago, in which they repaired, I guess it was like a bunion on my top of my foot that they ended up putting in some kind of implant that connected my toe, my big toe, to my foot. I'm sure that some of the doctors can give a little bit more, medical detail about what that is, but I can't recall it right now. But anyway, shortly after I got finished with that surgery, I guess maybe 3 or 4 months after that, I started to run again. I was determined not to give up on my exercise program. That was important to me. And although I still, feel a little discomfort, running, I don't allow it to stop me from, my exercise program. I'm determined to keep that going by God's grace. And incorporated in that, I do a few push-ups, and every once in a while I go into the gym and I do some presses and stuff like that. Nothing heavy. I don't do nothing much heavier than my plate, really, but I'm determined to maintain an exercise program that I believe will help keep me fit. And by God's grace, the Bible admonishes us that we can do all things through Christ that gives us strength. And I've claimed that promise, and He has never failed me yet. And so, in spite of the fact that I've had some injuries and some setbacks, and I've had to lay off for an extended period of time, I get right back on that horse, as it were, and I continue to ride. And so, right now I'm 58 years old, and as I mentioned, I run about 5 times a week, and I do about 4 miles, when I get out there. And it's been working well, and I'm just grateful to God for His goodness towards me.